Hab dich heute nicht in der Schule gesehen.
Ich war beim Arzt.
Was ist denn?
Frauenprobleme.
Wünschst du dir nicht auch manchmal ein Typ zu sein?
Klar, immer.
Das ist das wohl magischste Geräusch, das du je hören wirst.
Ich will noch nicht Mutter werden.
Wo sonst kannst du hin?
Nirgendwo in Pennsylvania.
Ich denke, du solltest es woanders versuchen.
Fahrt ihr nach New York? Was macht ihr da?
Familie besuchen, sowas.
Mit wem bist du heute hier?
Mit meiner Cousine.
Habt ihr einen Platz zum Schlafen? Ich weiß, ihr kommt von weit weg.
Ich finde schon was.
Die Halle ist geschlossen, keine Übernachtung.
Wo ist der Rest vom Geld?
Ich will bloß, dass dir nichts passiert. Ich weiß, es ist schwer. Ich werde dir ein paar Fragen stellen. Sie können sehr persönlich sein. Antworte entweder mit niemals, selten, manchmal oder immer.
Hi, Eliza. Thank you for talking to me today. And we're here to talk because of your wonderful film, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which we, the Protestant Film Jury in Germany, selected as Film of the Year. We were really impressed with your film, and I just, at the beginning, I'd like to read to you from our jury statement that explains why we selected your film. We thought that you treat with exceeding density and utmost prudence a subject matter that even after more than 100 years of struggle about birth control still is a minefield today. The comprehensive view and the subtle narration make Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always more than just a political film. They make it a great film.
Thank you.
All right.
So honored.
Yeah, your film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year in January, where it won an award, the U.S. Dramatic Special Jury Award for neorealism. We might have to talk about neorealism. And then in February, you showed the film at the Berlin Film Festival in the main competition. And that's where I saw it for the first time. And there really was this buzz about your film, that it's a must-see film. And then, sure enough, it won a Silver Bear, the Grand Jury Prize. So congratulations to all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let me ask you at the beginning, what inspired you to make this film?
I first began thinking about this film in 2012, 2013, I think it was. I was reading the newspaper, taking a break from editing my first feature, It Felt Like Love. And I was struck by a story. And the story, was from Ireland, and it was about the death of this woman, this dentist named Savita Halappanavar. And she died because she was denied a life-saving abortion in Ireland at the time when there was this cruel Eighth Amendment, that put the life of the fetus and the life of the mother at equal value. And I was, really devastated. And I immediately wanted to learn more about the history of the Eighth Amendment in Ireland. And I bought a book called Ireland's Hidden Diaspora. And the book was all about this journey that women would take from Ireland to London, across the Irish Sea and back in one day. And there was something that really resonated with me about this journey.
Yeah.
And I initially started to write a film, if I'm being honest, that was set in the UK, but then didn't feel like I could tell that story, and just began to think about, like, what does that journey look like in the United States?
Yeah, let me just get back to this woman whose real tragic story inspired you. I think she was 31 years old, and what was happening was that she was experiencing a miscarriage.
Yeah, blood poisoning.
That put her life in danger, and still at this point, the doctors said, no way. We won't give you an abortion. So, and it was only, I believe, last year that the law changed in Ireland as a historical change. Okay, so maybe let's talk about the United States for a moment.
Yeah.
Fill us in. What's the legal situation in the United States, and how did you then transfer your story from the inspiration from Ireland to the United States?
Well, you know, in the United States, on a federal level, abortion is legal. You know, we have this landmark case, Roe v. Wade, which, you know, grants constitutional rights to women to access abortion care. But from state to state, there are restrictions and bans that you know, make it virtually impossible for women to access care. So I, you know, just began, you know, doing research, you know, almost approaching the film like it was at first a documentary. And I started reading about how New York City has this long history of being considered the abortion capital of the United States, and a place where people could travel, you know, and, you know, get affordable access and care. But, you know, this idea of traveling to New York for an abortion, you know, was equally as interesting to me, you know, as this idea of crossing the Irish Sea. You know, why, you know, what it would be like to navigate this expensive and difficult and complicated city while you're simultaneously navigating a personal crisis.
I want to ask you about one aspect of your film. So your film tells the story of a 17-year-old young woman who is pregnant. It's an unwanted pregnancy. She wants to get an abortion. She's from Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, and there she can't get an abortion without the consent of her parents, which is a difficult issue. And so then she and her cousin Skylar, they take the bus and go to New York City, the big city they've never been to. There's one scene there, or what I want to ask you about is she goes to consult to a consultant agency in her hometown, and even sees a doctor who confirms the pregnancy. And they tell her that she's 10 weeks pregnant. But she arrives in New York, she learns that she is 18 weeks along in her pregnancy, which makes everything much more complicated. And I'd like to know, is that something that is a fact, or was this something you invented?
No, it's nothing. I'm sorry to say, it's nothing, you know, that I invented to create, you know, plot complications. It's something that really exists in our country. In America, They're very controversial, but they're called pregnancy care centers, and they are set up by volunteers. They're not doctors.
Oh.
They're not medical, and yet they offer pregnancy tests and sonograms, and there's nothing licensed about them, and they have no licenses to perform, any medical care, and they exist all over America, and they receive federal support. So it's very, very disheartening. And they are known for, in this country, misleading vulnerable young women.
By lying to them, yeah.
By lying to them, I mean, it's twofold. It's by lying, it's through being dishonest, and it's also because they're laymen. Which is, it's a total misrepresentation of a medical facility.
Yeah.
So I had never seen one in a film before. And I said, why you drive through all these small towns in America, and there's one here, and there's one here, and there's one here. Why has it not been, represented before in a film? So I went to them. And part of my research was I went in and I took the tests and I did the counseling sessions. So what you see in the film, while it's told through the perspective of the character, it's a reflection of authentic dialogues that I had with the women who worked there.
Okay. How would a 17-year-old woman in rural Pennsylvania even find out where she could go and get counseling care? That was, there was a recent issue here in Germany where women can have access to abortion up until the 12th week if they go to get counseling. But there was a huge, even legal issue whether doctors or clinics performing abortions, whether they could, quote unquote, advertise that. So what does a 17-year-old woman do who finds herself pregnant? Yeah. Where does she go?
Well, I asked myself the same question while I was writing the script. And I also talked a lot with social workers who work at clinics. And they, they said that they either end up at these pregnancy care centers and they lose valuable time in the process of trying to get an abortion, or they use the internet, the information highway, to find where they need to go.
And that way they could find out where to go in the Big Apple in New York City.
Yeah.
All right, so you're a filmmaker and you did make a documentary, even though there is a lot about the procedure, what we just
a fiction film, yeah.
Pardon me?
A fiction film, yeah.
Yes. And you wrote the script. So tell us a bit how that script came together, what the process of writing was.
I really believe in authenticity and credibility. And I spent a lot of time doing field work, but also I took the journey of the character. I got on the bus in this small town in Pennsylvania. I took the bus to New York, to Port Authority. For me, it's very important as a writer to walk in the shoes of my character as much as possible, to see what she sees from the window of the bus, to embody and inhabit the story as much as I possibly can. Even though I did all this research like a documentary, really the story that I'm telling, it needed to be personal to be effective and not didactic. So I like to be in the world, and then I come home and I write. and I go back into the world and I would meet social workers, or I would wander around Chinatown at night. And I like to have this kind of physical and immersive experience through real, real conversations, real events, and then bring those experiences back to the writing. I'm not somebody who loves being at a computer staring at a blank white page.
And how did you develop your protagonists? And one of the really wonderful parts about your film are these two actresses who are, now they're actresses, but I understand one had Broadway experience, Talia Ryder, and then Sydney Flanagan, who plays Autumn, the pregnant young woman. She is really a singer and didn't have acting experience before. So what protagonists did you have in mind, and how did you find these two?
I found Sydney while I was working on another film, actually. I was producing a documentary in Western New York. And Sydney, we had met and we thought maybe she would be a potential subject for this other film years ago, and she was only 14. And we added her just like on Facebook as a way to track potential subjects. And over the years, she just kept showing up in my newsfeed on Facebook. And it was like watching a coming of age story on social media. She would post very personal things about herself, about high school, about her heartbreaks, about her boyfriends, her loves, and I was captivated by her through Facebook and her music. And she would post videos of herself just alone in her bedroom. And there's something about her videos that captured the rawness and the authenticity of being, 16, 17. So she, in a way, while I was writing, she was a reference point for the character, but I never thought she would ever want to be in a movie. And then when we started casting the film and seeing real actors, I just felt they didn't have the vulnerability and the strength that Sydney had. And so finally we twisted her arm, and she, without really knowing us, trusted us to come to New York to audition for the film. And Talia had stage experience and, wants to be a professional actress. But oddly and coincidentally, she's from the same place that Sydney was from. So when they met, there was this immediate spark and this immediate connection, that came from place.
And Sydney gets to perform some of her songs, right? There's some of her songs in the film.
No. She performs songs from like the 50s or 60s. Actually, they're recognizable, known songs.
All right, I have to go back to that. Okay, and so there's a real close relation between these two young women who are cousins in the film, and that's also, that's their relation. It's in the emotionality, but it's also in the visuals. And again, I think your film is really extraordinary, and you had the opportunity to work together with a super accomplished French cinematographer, Hélène Louvard. You worked with her already on your previous films, on your previous film, and she is has quite a big portfolio of filmmakers she worked with, from Agnes Varda, Alice Rohrwacher, and Wim Wenders, the film on Pina Bausch. Now, I think this proximity that there is, this closeness between the two characters, is also achieved through the cinematography. Could you tell us more about that part of your film?
Yeah, I think for me, intimacy is so important for what I do. And you have to have a DP. I have to work with a DP who can, support the kind of environment that I want to create around the actors. And Helene is very much like a performer, with the way that she operates the camera. She is almost like a character. And I think, for me, I always try to send other crew members away, and have as few people around the actors as possible. And I feel it's my job as a director to, create that space. And it's always a struggle a little bit, because the set dresser wants to make sure everything with the set, in a way, I'm telling people that other people on set, that they can't do their jobs, but for me to be, to have this intimacy and this closeness with the DP and, these two young performers, it was essential to the success of the film. And Helene and I have a process of shot listing, and she knows how I work. She knows that point of view is important. She knows the details we're trying to capture. But within that, I give her a freedom to operate. And she's not handheld. She has a device that she uses, a rig that sort of stabilizes the camera in one sense, but gives her a fluidity to operate. So I think I make very precise, sort of simple choices, and I'm not a stagey director. And for me, I prioritize intimacy over everything else. And I think that there is like a balletic quality to the way in which Helene operates.
So in itself, a poetic quality achieved through the cinematography. Would you go along with this category, neorealism, for your film?
I don't know about the neo. Maybe. I mean, I believe and I aspire to make a certain kind of realism, but I do it because I believe that there's a beauty to it.
Yeah. Now there's this really extraordinary scene, the most powerful scene perhaps in the film, that also lent itself to the title of the film, where the care worker, healthcare provider is asking Autumn a set of questions that could be answered with never, never, really, sometimes, always, and which is a really intense moment and filmed so well. When did you know that this was going to be the title of your film?
It was, I believe, titles, I don't ever like search for titles or brainstorm for titles. I believe that while you're writing, a title will reveal itself.
And it certainly did.
It did. It did. It revealed itself to me in the research process. When I was talking to a counselor at Planned Parenthood, and I said, if I was a minor, take me through the intake process. What would you be concerned about? What would you want to know? And they say, well, they told me this is the process. And when she kept going through this very vulnerable part of the test, this questionnaire, which is called intimate partner violence. And they don't want to ask yes or no, because they found in asking, yes or no to try, it's a way to open up a conversation. And they found that in asking yes or no questions, that it didn't, it wasn't opening people up, it was shutting them down. So they started asking, using the Likert scale, never, rarely, sometimes, always. And when I heard it, repeated and repeated and repeated, I thought that there was something, very poetic to it. And it was lyrical and rhythmic and probing. But it also spoke instantly for me to the larger restrictions across the state, and each state trying to individually decide in what situation should a woman have ownership over her own body and her own decisions. So it spoke to the moment, but it also spoke to the broader themes of the story.
Right. I think it's a powerful and overwhelming, touching moment, because it's almost as though a whole new film could begin based on that moment. Let's talk a little bit about the relationship to men. There are some, especially the young fellow there on the bus, that the two young women encounter, and he wants to get to know them and so forth. He's trying to charm them, but he's also
relentless,
a little relentless and encroaching, and so and then when they don't know where to go overnight, then somehow he's there again in the scene. What did you maybe could you say something more about about the relation to men, or what you basically wanted to bring across there through this relationship?
For me, in a classical story, a hero's journey, there's always an antagonist. And I didn't want that character in this story, because in a way the film is addressing, systemic misogyny, sexism, and the ways in which that is present and palpable within the environment every day. And I felt that through small moments, I could speak more powerfully to the hostile climate that exists around women and young women. And I could play with it because they're younger. And so that I think as you get older, you become desensitized to those experiences. But when you're younger, they're heightened. So for me, it was about exploring ambient sexism and, all the ways in which women are disempowered along their journey. And particularly, it all comes to, a head with this male character on the bus whose behavior could be perceived as charming, but, he thinks so. But, it's truly, he's invasive, and he doesn't pick up on the cues that tell him to go away.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted the film to explore, that tension and all the ways in which women deflect, male advances and attacks. throughout their lives. But of course, he becomes, more of a character when they are up a tree in New York and don't have money and they need him.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, we talked a lot about your film now. Now I'd like to ask you more about the reception of your film. I already talked about the festivals, but then it started in the United States in mid-March, right? So what was the response to your film?
Well, I've been promoting a lot of it from home. There's been a tremendous amount of critical support, and it continued, for till now, and we're ecstatic about, the support. We did not get to open in theaters the way that we had hoped because of the pandemic and because of our, the limitations of the distributor, and well, we pivoted quickly to an online release. But I'm largely grateful that audiences got to see the film, even if it was in lockdown. They experienced it, and there was so much terror during the peak of the pandemic that women weren't getting access to the care that they needed. And we had politicians who were playing a dangerous game, with women's access. So, it was important for me to continue to speak about the film, to promote the film, to connect with audiences through the issues at the core of the film, but also just through cinema. So it's been an extraordinary run, I would say, despite the unprecedented circumstances.
Yeah, here in Germany as well, your film was released mid-October, I think, or during the month of October, and then November. Since November, we have a lockdown here, and all the movie theaters are shut. Is it still available as video on demand?
Yes.
It is. Okay,
Yeah.
That's good. And maybe we're coming to the end of our conversation. Maybe as a final question, I'd like to ask you about how the pandemic has affected your work with regard to this film that you were just promoting, but also beyond that. Here in Germany, the film industry, and especially independent filmmakers and all the talents and technicians, are really existentially affected by the pandemic. What's it like for you and your friends, your colleagues who work in the field?
Well, I am in, a lucky position in that I'm at the end of a film cycle, so I am, doing what I would have been doing anyway, which is I'm at home writing and developing projects. And I have a parallel career as a professor. So I've been home teaching I teach at a school.
Columbia Film School, right?
No, not Columbia. I teach at Pratt Institute, which is an art school in Brooklyn. Yeah. And it's been, for me, a welcome distraction, to be able to be at home, online teaching and writing and promoting. And the months for me have gone quickly. So I'm lucky. I don't know what production will look like when I'm, ready to shoot again. I don't know what theaters will look like. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't.
Yeah, none of us has, and well, we hope for that it's going to be better in 2021. And I think all of us also are missing the opportunity to go to movie theaters to really see films where they belong on the big screen. But it's wonderful having at least some alternative, and also having the possibility to talk to you here from Frankfurt. I'm here in the middle of Frankfurt to New York. So that's, I'm glad we made that happen. Typically, we would be at the German Film Institute Film Museum here in Frankfurt, the DFF, and celebrating your film with a special screening. We can't do this now, but thank you so much for talking to me. And again, congratulations to this film, and I'll hope to see many more wonderful films coming from you.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. Thank you so much for the recognition.
You're very welcome.